There's a recording of Sam Cooke that you've probably never heard. Not because it's rare, not because it's hard to find, but because for 22 years it wasn't supposed to exist at all. 1963. Sam Cooke records a live album. His record label hears it and immediately locks it in a vault. Not for a few months, not for a year, for over 2 decades. And here's what makes this really strange. When the album finally came out in 1985, critics called it one of the greatest live recordings ever made. Some said it was better than James Brown's Live at the Apollo. Others called it Sam Cooke's masterpiece. So why would RCA Records bury a masterpiece? Why would they record an incredible performance and then actively prevent the world from hearing it? And most importantly, what was on those tapes that was so dangerous that even after Sam Cooke died in 1964, they still kept it locked away? Because that's what happened. Sam Cooke died, and RCA said, nope, still can't release it, for 21 more years. When you finally hear this album, the first thing you notice is the voice. It doesn't sound like Sam Cooke, at least not the Sam Cooke everyone thinks they know. No smooth crooning, no romantic ballads. This is someone screaming, sweating through his suit, losing his voice, the crowd absolutely losing their minds around him. And suddenly you realize, maybe we never knew Sam Cooke at all. Maybe everything we were told about him was carefully constructed, a performance, a mask. And on January 12, 1963, in a small nightclub in Miami, that mask came off. The tape recorders were running. Everything was captured, and that's exactly why it had to be buried. Okay, so here's what doesn't add up. By 1963, Sam Cooke is one of the biggest stars in America. He'd gone from gospel singer to pop sensation. Songs like You Send Me, Cupid, Twisting the Night Away, massive hits. RCA Records loved him. Television loved him. He was sophisticated, charming, successful. But if you talk to people who actually saw Sam Cooke perform live during this period, they tell you something strange. They say there were 2 different shows. When Sam played venues for mixed or predominantly white audiences, he was polished, controlled, the perfect entertainer, everything you'd expect from hearing his records. But when he played the Chitlin circuit, black nightclubs across the South, something completely different happened. The jacket came off, the tie got loosened, and Sam Cooke transformed into this raw, intense performer who looked nothing like the guy on American Bandstand. He'd scream, let his voice crack, work the crowd like a preacher at a revival, which made sense because that's exactly what he'd been before crossing over to pop music. RCA knew about both versions, they'd seen him perform, they understood who he really was. But they made a very deliberate choice about which Sam Cooke would appear on records. The safe one, the one that wouldn't make anyone uncomfortable. And for a while, this worked perfectly. Sam became a crossover king. Everyone was happy, until January 1963. That's when RCA made a decision that would create a problem lasting 2 decades. They sent engineer Wally Heider down to Miami to record Sam Cooke live at the Harlem Square Club. They probably thought they'd capture some polite applause, some controlled stage charisma, maybe a few live versions of his hits. What Wally Heider recorded instead was something else entirely. Something that would make RCA executives very, very nervous. January 12, 1963, Friday night, Overtown, Miami. The Harlem Square Club. This isn't Carnegie Hall. This isn't Ed Sullivan. This is a small black nightclub where the audience is packed in tight, close enough to touch the stage. Sam Cooke walks out, and you can tell immediately. He knows exactly who he's performing for tonight. Not executives, not critics, not the crossover audience that bought You Send Me. His people. So what does he do? From the very first song, it's clear this is different. Sam's voice is aggressive, urgent. The band is tight and funky, pushing hard. And the crowd? They're not sitting politely. They're screaming, shouting back at him. Every line gets a response. Yeah, Sam. Sing it. Take your time. This isn't a concert. This is church. This is testimony. This is a conversation between an artist and an audience that speaks the same language. You can hear Sam feeding off that energy, getting more intense. His voice starts breaking, not from fatigue but from emotion, from giving too much. Between songs, he's talking to them, not in some rehearsed professional way. He's loose, real. You all having a good time tonight? The roar that comes back is deafening, and in the back of the room, Wally Heider's tape machines are capturing everything, every scream, every shout, every moment where Sam Cooke stops being the crossover star and becomes something the record-buying public has never been allowed to see. Something unfiltered. When the night ends, Heider packs up his equipment and heads back to RCA with the tapes. He's probably thinking this is going to be huge. This performance was electric. This is Sam Cooke at his absolute peak. What he doesn't know is that these tapes are about to create a crisis. So the executives at RCA sit down to listen, and immediately something feels wrong. Not with the quality. Anyone can hear this is an incredible performance. The energy is undeniable. Sam's vocals are powerful. The crowd response is electric. But this isn't the Sam Cooke they've been selling. The smooth romantic lead. The sophisticated crossover artist. The safe choice for mainstream America. This version is rougher, raw. His voice cracks with emotion. He's shouting. The gospel influence is impossible to ignore. And the audience, they're not politely clapping. They're responding in ways that feel unfamiliar, intense. This is a different world being captured on these tapes. RCA starts having meetings, discussions. They bring in marketing people. And slowly, a consensus forms. This album presents a problem. They don't say exactly what the problem is. Not out loud, not in any way that could be written down. But everyone in those meetings understands. This performance doesn't fit the image they've carefully constructed. It raises questions they don't want people asking. If America hears this version of Sam Cooke, what happens to everything they've built? So they make a decision. The album gets mixed, mastered, prepared for release, and then it goes into the vault. No release date announced, no explanation given. It just disappears. The greatest performance of Sam Cooke's career, locked away where no one can hear it. But here's what we don't know, and this is important. Did Sam fight them on this? Did he demand the album come out? Did he understand why they were shelving it? Or did he accept it as the price of playing the game? Because Sam Cooke wasn't naive. He was one of the sharpest businessmen in the industry. And that makes what happens next even more complicated. Here's something crucial to understand about Sam Cooke. He wasn't just talented. He was strategic. While most black artists in the early 1960s were signing terrible deals and losing control of their music, Sam Cooke was playing chess. He'd started his own record label, SAR Records. He'd negotiated ownership of his publishing rights. He understood the business in ways that most artists, black or white, didn't. So when RCA shelved the Harlem Square Club recording, Sam had to know. But what could he do? He was in an impossible position. To maintain his power, his independence, his ability to control his career, he needed to keep RCA happy. That meant continuing to give them what they wanted. More smooth singles, more crossover hits, more of the safe Sam Cooke. So that's exactly what he did. He kept recording, kept touring, kept playing the role. And the whole time, that tape from Miami sits in the vault. The performance where he was most himself. Where he connected with his core audience in the way he'd always connected before crossing over. Buried. Does it bother him? Does he resent it? Does he think about it late at night? We'll never know. Because Sam Cooke is very good at keeping those thoughts to himself. He smiles for the cameras, does the interviews, plays the game, but in less than 2 years, that game is going to end in the worst possible way. And when it does, that recording is going to take on a completely different meaning. December 11th, 1964, Los Angeles, a motel. The details are messy and disputed and still debated today. Sam Cooke is shot and killed. He's 33 years old. The official story never quite adds up. Questions linger, theories multiply. But that's a different documentary. What matters for this story is what happens next, because now RCA has a choice. Sam Cooke is dead. He can't advocate for the album anymore. He can't push for its release. He can't even know whether it comes out or not. So what do? They could release it, honor his memory, let the world hear this incredible performance. They don't. The album stays in the vault. And here's what makes this so disturbing. RCA continues to profit from Sam Cooke's music. They release compilations, greatest hits packages. They license his songs for commercials and movies. They sell the smooth, sophisticated version of Sam Cooke to the world. The version they created. The version they controlled. And the whole time, the Harlem Square Club recording sits untouched. The performance where Sam Cooke was most alive. Most himself. Most connected to who he really was. Still buried. Years pass. 5 years. 10 years. 15. The music industry changes. Soul music evolves. Sam Cooke becomes a legend, remembered for his beautiful voice and his crossover success. But that recording from Miami? Still locked away. It's almost like they're protecting something. Making sure the version of Sam Cooke that history remembers is the one they chose, not the one that actually existed. 21 years after his death, someone finally decides it's time. But why then? What changed? And what happens when the world finally hears what RCA tried so hard to hide? 1985, 22 years after the performance, 21 years after Sam's death, RCA Records quietly releases Live at the Harlem Square Club 1963. No big announcement, no major marketing campaign, they just put it out. And immediately something strange starts happening. Critics who cover music for a living, people who thought they understood Sam Cooke's place in music history, start writing reviews that sound almost confused. They're not confused about the quality. Everyone agrees the album is incredible. They're confused about what they're hearing. This doesn't sound like the Sam Cooke they thought they knew. Rolling Stone's review talks about the raw power, the intensity. Other critics start comparing it to James Brown's Live at the Apollo. High praise. But there's something else in these reviews. A sense of disorientation. Because if Sam Cooke was always capable of performing like this, with this much intensity, this much soul, this much connection to his gospel roots, then what were they hearing on all those other records? What version of Sam Cooke had they been listening to for the past 22 years? People start going back through his catalog with different ears, listening for clues, trying to reconcile the smooth pop star with this raw, powerful performer from Miami. And slowly a new understanding starts to emerge. But critics aren't explaining it yet. Not fully. They're describing what they hear, noting the difference, pointing out the contrast. Something was going on with Sam Cooke that nobody fully understood while he was alive. And this album is the evidence. But evidence of what, exactly? That's the question people are starting to ask in 1985. And the answer, when it finally becomes clear, is going to rewrite everything we thought we knew about Sam Cooke's career. Okay, so here's what was actually going on the entire time. And this is the part that makes the 22-year burial make sense. Sam Cooke wasn't just talented. He was navigating something much more complicated than most people realized. In the early 1960s, the music industry had very specific ideas about what black artists were allowed to be. If you wanted mainstream success, real crossover appeal, you had to sand down certain edges. Make yourself palatable. Perform blackness in a way that didn't make white audiences uncomfortable. Sam Cooke understood this better than almost anyone. He'd watched other black artists struggle. He'd seen careers destroyed by being too much of one thing or another. So he made a calculation. He would give the mainstream audience what they needed to accept him. The smooth voice, the sophisticated image, the romantic ballads. But he never lost who he actually was. When he performed for black audiences in black venues, the mask came off. The gospel roots showed. The intensity came through. The real connection happened. And RCA knew this. They'd seen both versions, but they made a deliberate choice to only let one version exist on record. The Harlem Square Club recording broke that carefully maintained illusion. It showed both sides at once. It proved that the smooth pop star was a performance. Brilliant, strategic, necessary, but still a performance. If that album had come out in 1963, white audiences would have seen the version of Sam Cooke that black audiences knew all along, and RCA was terrified of what that might mean. Not because the performance was bad, because it revealed the calculation, the code switching, the way Sam Cooke had to split himself in two to survive in the industry. That's what they were hiding, not just a great live album. The truth about what it took for a black artist to achieve mainstream success in 1963 America. Sam Cooke had to perform respectability, had to prove he was safe, had to convince white audiences he was one of the good ones. And the Harlem Square Club recording showed that none of it was natural. It was work, strategy, survival. That's why it stayed buried. Not to protect Sam Cooke. To protect the industry's comfortable narrative about integration and crossover success. Because if people understood what artists like Sam Cooke were actually sacrificing, the parts of themselves they had to hide, it would raise uncomfortable questions. Questions the industry wasn't ready to answer in 1963, or 1964, or 1970, or even 1980. It took until 1985 for someone to finally decide that maybe enough time had passed, that maybe audiences were ready to see the whole picture. But by then, Sam Cooke had been dead for 21 years. He never got to see people finally understand what he'd been doing all along. When Live at the Harlem Square Club finally came out, it didn't just add to Sam Cooke's legacy. It completely transformed it. Before 1985, Sam Cooke was remembered as the smooth crooner, the crossover king, the bridge builder who proved black artists could achieve mainstream success. All of that was true, but it was incomplete. After 1985, people started understanding something more complex. Sam Cooke wasn't just crossing over, he was code switching, adapting, playing a long game that required showing different audiences different versions of himself. And he did it without losing his connection to where he came from. That's what the Harlem Square Club recording proved. When he was with his core audience, in a black venue, performing for people who understood his gospel roots, he was completely himself. He never sold out. He just understood that survival meant strategic performance. Music critics started going back through his entire catalog with this new understanding. The gospel influence that was always there, carefully balanced. The moments in his pop songs where you could hear the church coming through, just barely. The way he built his career with such precision. It all made sense now. Sam Cooke was playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. He understood that to maintain independence and power, he had to give the industry what it needed. But he never forgot who he really was. The Harlem Square Club recording was proof, and suddenly his death felt even more tragic, because Sam Cooke never got to see this reevaluation, never got to know that history would eventually understand the impossible game he was playing. He died in 1964, maybe believing that the sanitized version was all that would survive. that the truth would stay locked in that vault forever. He was wrong. The truth came out, but 21 years too late for him to know. So here we are, looking back at this story from decades later. And there's one question that keeps coming up. How many other artists had their truth buried? Because Sam Cooke's story only became visible because that recording eventually came out. Because someone at RCA finally decided to open the vault. But how many other vaults are there? How many other performances were deemed too raw, too real, too complicated for mainstream consumption? How many artists had to split themselves in two just to survive? Had to hide entire sides of who they were? And how many of them died never knowing if anyone would understand what they were actually doing? Sam Cooke was brilliant, strategic, successful by almost any measure. But even he couldn't control his own narrative in the end. He gave the performance of his life in 1963, and his record label locked it away. He died in 1964, and they kept it locked. For 21 more years, the world only knew the version of Sam Cooke that RCA wanted them to know. The smooth crooner, the crossover king, the safe legend. And all the while, in that vault, the evidence sat. The proof that everything was more complicated than the industry wanted to admit. When Live at the Harlem Square Club finally came out in 1985, it should have been a celebration. Instead, it feels like an admission. We were wrong. We should have let people hear this. We should have trusted audiences with the truth. But Sam Cooke wasn't there to accept that apology. He'd been gone for 21 years. What we're left with is this recording, this document, this piece of evidence that Sam Cooke was always more than what he was allowed to be on record. And maybe that's the real legacy of this album. Not just that it's incredible, though it is easily one of the greatest live recordings ever made, but that it forces us to ask uncomfortable questions about authenticity, control, and who gets to decide which version of an artist the world sees. Sam Cooke navigated an impossible balance. He played the game brilliantly. But that night in Miami, he gave his audience something different. Himself. Complete. Unfiltered. And his record label decided the world couldn't handle it. They were wrong. The world was ready. They just weren't brave enough to find out until Sam Cooke was gone.